Look around the world. Every country is drowning in debt. The United States owes over $38 trillion. China, despite being an economic giant, carries massive debt. Japan's debt is so large it's almost incomprehensible. Even wealthy oil nations and export powerhouses can't escape it. But here's the question that keeps economists up at night. If everyone owes money, who exactly are they paying? This is Shadow Economics, where we break down the money game that runs the world. And today, we're going to answer a question that seems impossible. Who holds the bill when the entire planet is in debt? To understand today's debt crisis, we need to go back over 300 years. In 1694, England was at war with France and desperately needed money. The king had a problem: no gold left in the treasury. So he made a deal with wealthy merchants. Give me money now, and I'll pay you back with interest using future tax revenue. To manage this new system, they created the Bank of England. This was revolutionary. For the first time in history, a government could spend money it didn't have yet. And those merchants? They got something valuable in return: a government bond. A promise on paper that could be bought, sold, and traded. France copied the idea. The Netherlands improved it. The young United States used it to fund its revolution. Soon, every major power realized something. Debt wasn't weakness, it was power. The countries that could borrow the most could build the most. Armies, roads, empires. All funded not by gold in a vault, but by promises written on paper. Fast forward to today. Global debt has exploded to over $315 trillion. That's nearly 3 times the size of the entire world economy. Think about that. We owe 3 times more than we produce. The United States leads the pack with $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. The European Union collectively owes around $14 trillion. And every 100 days, the world adds another $1 trillion to the pile. But here's where it gets interesting. Who exactly is holding all this debt? Let's start with America, because its debt tells the story of how the whole system works. Of that $38 trillion, about half is what they call publicly held debt. This means it's owed to actual investors, not just shuffled between government departments. Now, of those investors, about 2/3 are American. Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, roughly $9 trillion, is held by foreign countries. Japan holds about $1 trillion of U.S. debt. China holds around $800 billion. Then there's the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say America owes China, they're technically right. But China only holds about 2% of America's total debt. Most of America's debt is owed to Americans. Here's how the circle works. The U.S. Treasury issues bonds. American banks buy them. The Federal Reserve sometimes buys them back, creating new money in the process. Americans pay taxes that fund the interest on those bonds. That interest flows into American retirement accounts. It's a loop. America owes America. But the circle doesn't stop at national borders. It's planetary. Japan lends to the United States by buying treasury bonds. The United States lends to Europe through organizations like the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. And developing countries, they park their foreign currency reserves in Western bonds, lending right back to wealthy nations. Everyone owes everyone. It's like a giant poker game where every player borrowed their chips from someone else at the table. The game only works as long as nobody tries to cash out. Behind this whole system sits another layer: the markets. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. They control tens of trillions in assets. They're the ones who really decide which countries get to borrow cheaply and which ones pay a premium just to survive. When these institutions lose confidence in a country, currencies collapse. Governments fall. Entire economies get restructured overnight. At the center of this web are central banks. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. These aren't just regulators. They're the architects of debt itself. Every time a central bank buys government bonds, it creates new money. The government's debt becomes the bank's asset. The bank's new money becomes the government's spending power. Here's the wild part. Every dollar, every euro, every yen in circulation represents debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every piece of currency is essentially an IOU. For decades, this system has worked because of one thing: confidence. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying interest, the machine keeps running. But what happens when confidence breaks? We've seen it before. Greece in 2010. The government couldn't pay its debts. Bond investors panicked. Interest rates spiked. The European Central Bank and IMF stepped in to rescue Greece. But that rescue came with brutal conditions: tax increases, spending cuts, mass unemployment. An entire generation sacrificed to keep the system alive. Argentina has defaulted on its debt multiple times. Each time, the economy collapsed. Each time, everyday people paid the price. Sri Lanka in 2022. Fuel shortages, political chaos, and economic collapse when the government ran out of money to pay its loans. When the system breaks, suddenly the creditors become visible. The IMF, the rating agencies, the anonymous bondholders who can bring entire nations to their knees. But here's the strange part. Even after these collapses, the system restarts. New loans replace old ones. Debts get restructured. The machine resets with different names on the same balance sheet. Why? Because modern debt isn't designed to be repaid? This is the secret that changes everything. Governments today don't plan to pay off their debt. Not now. Not ever. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to pay back the principal. But governments work differently. They treat debt like a subscription service, issuing new bonds to pay off old ones. It's called refinancing, and it never stops. The United States will never pay off its $38 trillion. It will refinance it forever. Japan's debt is over 250% of its GDP, and yet it still borrows at near zero interest rates. Why do investors keep lending? Because government debt isn't seen as a liability. It's an asset, the safest one in the world. Pension funds depend on it. Banks use it as collateral. Central banks treat it like money itself. The system needs governments to stay in debt, because if they ever paid it all off, the world would lose its most trusted financial instrument. Imagine if the U.S. suddenly paid down every dollar of debt. Banks and pension funds worldwide would lose their safest asset. The dollar supply would shrink. Deflation would hit. The economy would collapse. Paying off the debt would destroy the system. So governments do the opposite. They keep borrowing, not recklessly, but steadily. The debt becomes the heartbeat of the global economy, pumping through every market, every pension, every mortgage on earth. That's why when politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying down the national debt, they're selling a fantasy. The goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it sustainable, serviceable, and trusted. Because once trust disappears, the numbers don't matter anymore. Confidence collapses. Interest rates explode. And the entire economy, built on rolling promises, grinds to a halt. The real secret? The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to keep everyone believing it will be. Now, when we say we owe it to ourselves, that's only half true. Because interest payments don't flow equally through society. They flow upward. From taxpayers to the institutions and investors who hold the debt. From workers to wealth holders. From the many to the few. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries. It's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global debt have risen together. The system rewards those who own debt and punishes those who only pay it. This is the same story, just scaled up. From credit cards to mortgage to national budgets to the entire planet. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They're two parts of the same engine. The problem is what happens when the engine runs out of fuel. When new borrowing can't keep up with old promises. That's when the question, who do we owe, stops being abstract and starts being personal. So who's at the top of this pyramid? Who's the creditor? It isn't China. It isn't Wall Street. It isn't the IMF. It's all of them. And it's us. The modern financial system has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it. Investors trade it. And ordinary people depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred completely. Debt used to mean bondage, chains, slavery. Today, it means balance, stability, growth. But if that balance ever tips, if confidence ever breaks, the illusion ends. And we'll remember what debt really is, a promise that can't be kept forever. If this video changed how you see the economy, subscribe to Shadow Economics. The truth is always hiding in plain sight. We'll help you find it.